morning, Eugene. How are you?
Good morning, Jana. I'm great today. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Well, we did a recent podcast on the how media is captured in Ireland. We talked about the media complaint we did to News Talk, who was pushing the agenda on the sexualization and indoctrination of children, how the former Minister for Education was pushing the agenda, and then how Commission Amman, meant to be our publicly funded media watchdog, how they responded and how they denied us a voice and were not objective or impartial. So today we're going to talk about global media, because it's not just media in Ireland that's pushing an agenda, the global agenda. It's obviously the global media as well. So Eugene, I know you've done a deep dive into this, and this will be education for me going through this with you today. So you've done a great piece of research, and I can't wait to see this myself on Project Syndicate. So I'll turn it over to you to talk about what it is and walk us through it.
Yeah, Jana. So we're going to talk about Project Syndicate, and I guess most people probably won't have any idea what Project Syndicate is all about, but hopefully by the end of this video, you know. And it's controlling the mainstream media. I call it the technocratic narrative, which is the kind of narrative that you get on the mainstream. It talks about, climate crisis. It talks about transgender rights. It talks about racism and the rise of the far right and populism, and it talks everything against Trump, for example. So Trump can do no right when you're talking about this media. So I'm gonna play a little video first. So there's a short video here, which when I was doing the research I came across, which is actually useful. It's got an interesting title: The Fabian Society Presents Project Syndicate, the Ministry of Real Truth. So we'll just watch this video for a couple of minutes. It's very short. It'll kind of tee up the discussion then on Project Syndicate, and we'll get into it then in a bit more detail. So let's just watch the video.
The various news media do not produce their news themselves, but use information and images from news agencies such as Reuters, the Dutch ANP, and the French AFP. These organizations are anything but independent. Reuters is owned by the powerful Canadian Thomson family. The ANP is owned by Dutch investor Kees Omen, and the AFP is largely financed by the French government. The main journalists and editors who work at our media or at these news agencies are affiliated with important journalistic organizations, such as the European Journalism Centre. These are one of the largest funders of media-related projects across Europe. They train journalists, produce study materials, give internships at, for example, the ANP, and work closely with the world's largest corporations such as Google and Facebook. For journalistic analysis and opinion, all the major media outlets in the world use Project Syndicate, the most powerful organization within its field. It supplies the 506 most important media outlets in 156 countries. Project Syndicate, plus an organization such as the European Journalism Centre, together with the news agencies, are the connecting link between all the different media outlets around the world. When newscasters read the news from their teleprompters, there is a good chance that the text comes from one of these organizations. As a result, the global media is often synchronized in its reporting.
But we are concerned about trouble and trying to be responsible one-sided news stories.
I guess that video kind of tees up the discussion now on Project Syndicate, because they mention it at the end. And there's a website, projectsyndicate.org, the world's opinion page, right? So that's what it's geared up to be. It's geared up to provide commentary on world news. And so commentary on what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in America, etc. And that's on Europe, all across Europe, etc. So they've and we'll get into some of the detail here, but you can see one of the headlines already, which kind of tees up the Trump has wrecked the U.S. economy. So this kind of shows you what you're going to get on Project Syndicate. It's definitely a particular bias, and when we see the people who are behind it, there's no surprise that it has that bias. And you can see it there. They love communists love talking about democracy, and so does Project Syndicate, because they're into the whole stakeholder communism, stakeholder capitalism, which some people would call it. They're into all that stuff. They're into the whole authoritarian, technocratic rule. So, it's all hard left stuff from that perspective, but it's hard left supported by Bill Gates and George Soros, as we'll see. So it's interesting that the billionaires are driving the hard left at the moment.
Yeah, and the hard
Yeah.
left ideologues that we see running around the street with all their multicolored flags and their blue hair screaming for their rights, they may not even know that this is a billionaire movement and a globalist movement. They actually believe they're grassroots and it's about kindness and making sure that minorities have rights because they've been completely brainwashed by this. They haven't had the ability to use critical thinking.
Yeah, 100%. So let's get into it a little bit more. So here they go. So I have it here. Project Syndicate public service mission has received support from the Open Society Foundations, George Soros, right? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and then you're into the MasterCard, European Climate Foundation, European Investment Bank. Okay, and I picked there's a whole load of other ones here, and I picked out one just to give you an example, so you can see the kind of companies that are sponsoring this. GAMs. Let's take a quick look at them because this just shows you because these are the people who are on the left, and you look at it. These are stakeholder capitalist type companies who are bought into that whole notion of stakeholder capitalism, ESG, and here we have diversity and inclusion on the front page of their website when you talk about. So that's the kind of companies that are sponsoring this stuff. But the lead sponsors are George Soros and Bill Gates.
I saw
So
Google on there, Eugene, and I just want to touch really quickly on Google is I had a meeting recently with someone who worked in a senior position at big tech and talked about how there are teams that are all about the censorship. In Google, for example, they have teams that might be focused on just one topic, and that team of people, and the amount I heard quoted was up to $1 million a year for this particular topic. I won't say what it was. It was told in confidence. But their job is to, when people do a Google search on this particular topic, that team, their only objective is to make sure it puts in the order of what they want the public to see. So if you do a Google search on, let's just say DEI or climate or whatever the topic is, a team in Google, their job is to put it in the algorithm so it pushes to the public what they see, how they think, which is all of that, again, propaganda. So interesting to see
yeah.
Google on the previous slide there.
This is some of the statistics. So what do they do? So they're active in 156 countries. They work with 543 different media outlets. And they also give, half of those outlets the news feed at a subsidized rate. So you'll take it. So it's going to encourage people to take the feed, right? Because they're going to get it at a cheaper price. And they have commentaries in 66 languages. So this is a very big global operation in terms of manipulating the message, right? The fundamental mainstream news message. And as I said, it's primarily they provide commentary. So they don't tell you that, a flood occurred in some country or something. They'll put a commentary around that. The flood occurred because of climate change, because of something Donald Trump did, because whatever it's that's the commentary that they will add to it, right? So they don't just give you the facts, they give you the commentary and they put a perspective on it, and that perspective is a globalist technocratic narrative perspective that they provide, which would be in line with Bill Gates, Google, George Soros, etc., right? So that's the thing you're getting. So this gives you some of the high level stats. So you can see it there, 543 of the major outlets, media outlets. It's huge
They're a little
coverage.
bigger than the Natural Women's Council, Eugene. This is truly a case of we are up against the machine.
You totally are, right? And here just some more, just giving you the number of commentaries that they published, 1,296 last year. So, they provide a lot, right? So there's a lot of stuff coming out of these guys. And we'll take a look at some examples as we go. So here we go. Trump is wrecking the US economy. Even though the stock markets are as high as they've ever been, he's destroyed, and the employment rates are going really well. He's destroyed the economy. So, like, it's no surprise. I mean, there's a total anti-Trump agenda here. So everything you see regarding Trump will be absolutely headlines like this. So you can just expect to see that, right? So this
51,000 more Americans will
again,
die per year, but I'm sure they're not talking about what happened in 2021 and the excess deaths that were caused by that. Of course
I
not.
know. No. So Yeah, it shows you the bias, why U.S. democracy is failing and how to restore it, right? And of course, the Democrats tried to turn the U.S. into a non-country, basically. And they would happily have them part of some sort of globalist institution, transnational organization. That sell them out to that in the morning. The Democrats, and they love talking about democracy. Communists loved talking about democracy, Jan. It's so funny. Like they always talk about the destruction of democracy, whereas really it's a destruction of what they're trying to do to the democracy is what you're
And
actually talking about.
it's so
So here
inverted,
again,
Eugene.
it's just
I know it's also inverted. We did a campaign against the hate speech bill, which thankfully a week ago was kicked down the road or canceled, pushed
yeah,
back on the EU. But what's coming next, Digital Services Act, we can talk about another time. But when we campaigned for free speech, we were being called fascists by the hard left. It's like, wait a minute, we want free speech, you want censorship, but you're calling us the fascists. The hypocrisy and contradiction that comes from the hard left is just
yeah,
nonsensical. But I think people are seeing through that now. It's just gone too
yeah.
far.
So look at the headline here. It talks about mega rich high tech unelected oligarch gloating. So they're talking about what's going on in the US and but like that's what's happening with Bill Gates and George Soros, right? They're the exact same people doing the exact same stuff, except they do it on the quiet. They don't do it overtly. You're not going to see them on the television talking about policy and stuff like that. They're going to do it
No.
on the sly. They're going to feed it through the various NGOs that they fund, etc. So that's basically it. They'll do it through subversion.
Mhm.
Whereas what we're seeing in the US right now, it's quite open. People are arguing with each other, which is fine in public, and that's healthy. But you're not going to see that from the left. So this is just such hypocrisy. It really is. And let's just kind of move on. Again, that's just another example of. And here, the EU must stay true to its climate commitments. Yeah, because these guys are all bought into the climate narrative, right? The
Mhm.
United Nations climate narrative, and so they're totally on the page of we'll destroy Western society while we won't make any difference to China or India or what's going on in on the east. But it's we all have to bow to the. We all have to bow to what's going on from a climate perspective. So again, there's no surprise to see this sort of a headline in here.
And in
So
the
let's
school
just
books,
move.
Eugene, we've talked about how, in the school books, it's just poison with Greta Thunberg and the world's going to burn up and, eat your bugs in school books in America. I'm sure that will be coming our way. And they're teaching kids that they're impacting the climate. But what the climate alarmism is, it's about control and carbon tax and
Yeah.
letting people think they're hanging on to the green leaf. We will do anything to hang on to that limb when it's nothing to do with anything green. These people are flying all their private jets over to Davos to talk about why we shouldn't travel. So let's stop this hypocrisy, globalists, regarding this climate nonsense.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you said it, Jana. There's a control agenda based on climate
Mhm.
and CO2 usage, right? So they want to put that on everybody. So everybody's got to kind of meet their own individual targets and will lock you down to make sure you meet those targets. It's kind of creating that crisis. And we know where this has come from. I mean, we could do other videos to talk about the history of where this stuff came from because we know where it came from.
Yeah.
And it's also a wealth transfer. It's a wealth transfer from taxpayers and governments to the ultra rich corporations and the people who own them.
Yeah.
That's another thing that it is. And it's also a destruction of the West. It's a destruction of the Western world, the Western industry, etc. So it's three different things, right? And it's outrageous. And these people are clearly funded, obviously, by some of the people who sponsor this thing. So it's no surprise they're spreading the message, so to speak. So let's move on. Trump's WHO withdrawal could cost the US dearly, right? We're going to cover this particular story in another video. What's behind it, because of people mightn't be aware. Well, one thing people mightn't be aware that the Trump has pulled the US out of the WHO for good reason. For good reason.
Mhm.
These people are an overreach. They're trying to overreach with their pandemic treaty and their changes, their amendments to the international health regulations that are going to bring in authoritarian criteria and control mechanisms that the WHO will be able to leverage. It's
Yeah.
outrageous. These people are totally outrageous. And we know the sexuality guidelines that they have. they think that young kids should be masturbating, learning masturbation in school, that kids can change their gender and all this nonsense. This is the WHO. So this is the organization you're talking about. They're rotten. They're funded by Bill Gates. They're controlled by the CCP primarily. And the US were the main funder, actually, which is ironic, but they didn't appear to have the control. They didn't appear to have the levers to control this organization. So these people are outrageous. And this is an outrageous article, to be honest, as well. And look who it's written by, Gordon Brown. No surprise, right? Another globalist, communist writing this article. So it just shows you, this is the sort of people that write the articles for this group. And here we have the return of shameless shareholder capitalism. So they're telling you that they're into the whole stakeholder capitalism thing, right? Stakeholder capitalism is actually fascism. It's actually a form of fascism. Fascism is where large corporations engage and work with the government to actually do control over a country. That's actually, there's another term for that, and it's called fascism. So these people are ironic. They call you a fascist. And this is what they're implementing. Of course, ultimately, it appeals to the communists, the globalist communists, because globalism is fundamentally a communist thing. So that's part of it. So that's why it falls more on the left than it does on the right. But again, here they are talking about, that we're returning to capitalism and that there's something wrong with that. We should be doing the stakeholder capitalism thing. And we've covered stakeholder capitalism in other videos. People can look at it. We'll put links in the description. You can see what it's all about. And again, it's all about technocratic control and giving control to oligarchs, basically, and the stakeholders, so to speak. And you and I aren't stakeholders. The ordinary citizens in a country aren't the stakeholders. That's the point. You won't have control at all. And here it is. This is a link to the World Economic Forum. It'll tell you all about stakeholder capitalism, because that's what the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, that far right conspiracy theory about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum that doesn't really exist. Well, you can go and look at the links and you can see that it exists. And it's been implemented now by the United Nations, basically. That's who are implementing this strategy. So that's it, Jana. That's Project Syndicate. This is an outrageous organization. It's good to understand that they exist. It's important to see what the kind of material that they produce and understand how biased it is, how horrendously biased. And this is what's feeding the mainstream.
Yeah.
This is what's feeding mainstream media. So that's it. That's Project Syndicate.
Yeah.
Links
So
in the description.
that's great information, Eugene. And I think people can make up their own mind when they hear this. Is media biased? Is it feeding people propaganda, or does it show both sides of the story? Well, from seeing this, we know it's a very well-oiled machine. I mean, look at all the languages and the billions, trillions pumped into this. So it's obvious that we are up against the machine there. So great.
Okay.
Thanks
Thanks,
much for
Jana.
that.